Before we go much further, particularly into handling what happens when we get our data back, I really want to go through and make sure that we don't allow our program to crash at any particular point, that we capture all the errors that occur. So let's have a look at this. In our try block, we're saying if the value result is person, okay, and that works and it's fine, then really our program is just going to continue from here. Program continues from here. If the value came back was success, then obviously this part is going to run. However, if there's a sort of mistake in my PHP code, and again it's good for testing, if I hadn't taken into account, well, there's a couple of things that could happen. My response could be success, or I could have another response in there which takes me somewhere else called fail, or anything else, or I could even spell it incorrectly. So let's imagine I've made a spelling mistake which would give me a different key. So let's do it down here where something is amiss, and something is amiss occurs when instead of select all from person, I choose select leg from person. So I've changed my PHP code to deliberately give me an error message, okay, and the error message that's going to be thrown is this one where I've made a spelling mistake. I've left off the S on the end. So this time when I run my handler, okay, it's looking for person, it's looking for success, but it's not looking for success spelt incorrectly. So we'll see what happens there. And we get a key error success, which is what we expected because we were expecting a correct spelling of it. So really we need to handle those sorts of issues, maybe where we've got a key that we haven't decided to handle, or where we've probably made a spelling mistake in our key, and we could wrap that up in here in yet another try except block. So we could try finding whatever value we were interested in, because we know our program is going to run there. We're just looking for errors now. We can try it, and if that isn't the value that we expected, we can give out a useful error message rather than crash our program, so that we can handle it at some time. So I'm going to put value equals unspecified error, meaning that it could be a different key or an incorrectly spelt key, and that should this time work quite nicely, we hope. So if I run the program again, instead of it just crashing, I'm going to get unspecified error. There is one mistake that I haven't really captured at the moment, and that is, well, what happens? Well, let's take a look up here. If I change that back to index rather than index 3, I get a form. It's a completely different web page altogether. But the data that's returned isn't JSON formatted. There's no keys, so I can't even manage to write out as an unspecified error. It would just crash miserably. So let's see that again in our Python. So if I change that index 3 to index and run that, my program should crash. There we go. A few more trace lines for me to try and debug my code with, but I know what the error is. It's simply the fact that I'm looking at a web page that doesn't return JSON. This could happen, particularly if you are asking the user to input the web pages that they're trying to get the information from. How to handle this? Again, we're going to use a try and except block, because this is output and input. And if we use input or output, then really we need to wrap everything in a try and except block. So I'm going to do that now. So the whole thing, all of this, needs wrapping up in the except, in the try block. So try doing it. Okay, and I'm going to indent that region. try doing it. If it fails because the web page is wrong, then we're going to handle that exception here. Accept. And let's just be glib. Print Houston, we have a problem. So now we've pretty much handled all the errors. We've tried to be very careful with errors. We've looked at them in our PHP code, make sure we've handled them by saying they're errors, and now in our program which is reading the API, we're just making sure we're tidying everything up and that there are no errors left that we haven't handled. So if I run this program again, okay, this time I'm going to get Houston, we have a problem. So whatever my PHP code is, with errors, without errors, I'm now handling it. So let's put everything back to normal just to make sure it works as it should. So we're not going to have the leg, we're going to have that back as select all from person. And the other thing that we did was in our handle file is make sure we access the correct file. So now if everything's correct, we should end up on these lines. It should read person and the program will continue from there, going back to the start of this little series. That's where we start getting the result and passing the data. So let's run this and check that it works. There we go, we have the data returned. So we've catered for the majority of errors. I think we're fairly safe with this. What we really need to do is test each individual error and make sure it works. And there are a few errors that can be made. Let's see if I can specify them. The first one would be a call to a non-existent page. Call to a non-existent page. So we're going to get a 401 type error or 501. I can't remember which one it is. We'll have a look at that later. And that would be if I sort of called index 4. We haven't got an index 4. What happens when we do that? Houston, we have a problem, so we've managed that one. Another one would be a wrong password. So for example, if there was a database error and we couldn't connect to the database in any way. So let's have a database connection error. How does that work? So let's put this back to index 3 so we are looking at the correct file. Save it and go back to my Python, and a database connection error would be if it was an incorrect password. Save that and run my handler. There we go, it's come back with an error. That's nice. It's exactly what we wanted to happen. Another kind of error that we could have is if we have an empty data set. So it connects to the database, that's nice. But there is no data returned. So for example, let's go and fix the errors that we've been playing around with at the moment. Go back to the PHP. So we can connect to the database, there's no issue there. But we have an empty data set, and that is done where age is greater than 90. There is nobody. So that is going to return an empty data set. It is going to return results, but it's empty. So let's go back and run my program again. I've got an error, that's nice. Another error that we can have, we've just looked at, is maybe a key error where the key doesn't exist or it's incorrectly spelt. So we can check for that. So if I go back to my PHP, put the error back, I don't want to have multiple errors. And let's say I've got a key error. What can we do? Oh, we've got a key error here. I didn't put any success back to whatever it is. In fact, let's just change that altogether. Let's change that to fail. Okay, and that is going to fail when that is leg. So that's going to call that section. So I can now check it, and the key error is the fact that we haven't handled fail here. It's not just spelled incorrectly, it's a completely different key. There we go, and we get an unspecified error. We're handling it, they're errors, that is fine. Another kind, no, I think we've pretty much done it, is yeah, I think that's all the errors that we can get now. There's another one which would be a web page which doesn't return JSON script, but that's the same as just having a non-existent page. So we've looked at the majority of errors. We've either handled them in our PHP scripts, and let's put them all back so that they're working nicely. In fact, what I'm going to do is change all these successes here to the word fail while I can, because that makes more sense than actually using the word success. So we've got fail, 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 all done. So I'm going to save that. One last thing I'm actually going to do is check that I'm actually getting data back and I haven't made a mistake trying to put the mistakes right. So they're all the errors that we can have. Let's see what I've got now. I'll put everything right. And there we go. The only thing I need to do is change this one to the result fail and check that that works. So if I'm going to get a fail, that could be anything. Let's just change the database again and run the program. There we go, we've got the error coming back as fail. So we've done it. We've managed to cater for all the errors, both in the PHP file and in our Python file. Really, we're ready to move on now and manage this area where we try and have a look at the data and make some sense of the data that's returned.